All right, guys, welcome back to a great episode of Process Sports. We have a very special episode today. We have a former CFL player, Mr. Jas Dhillon. Jas, how are you doing?
Good, brother. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So first thing is, how are you doing through this whole COVID-19 situation? Are you staying healthy and stuff like that?
Yeah, man, I'm surviving, dude. It's going good. I set up my own home gym, gave me a little motivation to get that project started, and it kept my mental acuity on point, so I'm good to go, man.
Yeah, that's definitely huge things going on right now, especially being locked up and stuff like that. It's definitely good that you're exercising and staying positive, and hopefully all of the listeners are as well. All right. So, Jas, first question. It's kind of like this thing that I've been thinking about in my head, being at home, being stuck in quarantine and stuff, is I'm really thinking about the deeper meaning of sport. So I want to ask you, the first question is, what does sport mean to you?
You know, I was looking over that question for a while, and I really don't know how to answer that without saying that the person that I am today, a lot of it has to do with the sports that I was involved in. I'm not going to be the same man if I wasn't involved in sports from a young age. In that, what I'm trying to say is that there's so many life lessons and values and all that kind of stuff that I learned along the ways that it has such a huge and impactful way of forming who I was today that without it, I don't know who I would really be.
Totally. So the same thing for me. For me, like, I feel I've played sports my whole life. Without sports, I would not be the person I am today. Just the outside of life, outside of actual sport lessons you learn, whether that's working with different people, working in a team environment, coexisting with people you might not get along with, right? I definitely feel that sports has so many great lessons like that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so much more deep rooted than that, right? I mean, there's so many things that you learn along the way, like, like the commitment, the grind, and, just staying committed to the craft and all these things that you don't really know at the time, but they translate into every single facet of life, right?
Exactly.
And those lessons that you learn at a young age tend to magnify themselves as you grow older.
Totally. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today when we get into the interview. So kind of the first question I have about your football career is, why was it football? Why did you pick football, and how did you really fall in love with it? What was the first sign that you really fell in love with football?
So, I mean, growing up, I was always a little bit of an overweight kid, right? Mm-hmm. And my family comes from an athletic background. My grandpa, my dad, my uncle, they all played, various sports back home in India and all that kind of stuff. And so when I first started my sports journey, it was through my grandfather, who really wanted me to become a soccer player. Mm-hmm. And I played soccer for about 10 years, and I probably hated every single year that I played. And I was just doing it because, it was something to do. You had the boys there or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't until we had some neighbors that moved in who were, a football family, who kind of piqued my interest in that sport. And, I was always a little bit more physical with the way that I was playing anyways. And, being a bigger kid, it was something that I just kind of piqued my interest. And I started sneaking off to a couple of practices against my parents' wishes. And next thing you know, I was hooked.
Yeah. So, football being such an aggressive sport and such a physical sport, how did your family kind of like grow to the fact that you do want to let our kid play football? Because, being Punjabi, like, a lot of parents don't really want their kids to play that. They think it's really like dangerous and stuff like that. So how did you kind of convince them?
You know what? To be very honest with you, Justin, there was a lot of resistance in the beginning. There was this because I think, as any parent, they're a little bit apprehensive. They don't want to see their kid get hurt and all that kind of stuff. Back in those days when I started playing football, the whole topic about concussions and stuff like that wasn't really on the cusp of society as it is today. Mm-hmm. But they were more so, like, you're going to get a broken leg. Like, how are you going to go to school? Right. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, it was like, their concern was still there, but it was a little different. And I guess it was more so because they didn't understand the sport either. Totally. So they didn't really know what to expect from it. And, I think enough kicking and screaming on my end actually ended up, working in my favor. And, my grandfather was like, look, if that's what he wants to do, then at least he wants to do something. Let's give him an opportunity to do it.
Right. So clearly, for your family was very important with you growing up. So how did they help you achieve your goal of becoming a professional football player?
You know what? There was a support structure that has always been there for me. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't have been able to do a lot of the things that I did or I've accomplished up until this point if it wasn't for my family. Like, that comes from, my dad driving me out to training and practices, and then my sister driving me out to training and practices and taking me to games and all that kind of stuff. My grandfather being there supporting me. Like, they didn't understand the game, but they showed up and showed love anyways.
And
Which
sometimes that's even bigger than the knowledge of the game, right? Just that
exactly. And you know what? What else do you need? You have a support system there. You have people who got your back.
Totally.
You might as well go all out.
Right. I know exactly. For me speaking as well, like being from a Punjabi family, hockey wasn't something that we knew growing. That's what I played, right? But just the fact that my parents, grandparents supported me playing, right? That's kind of all you really need going through, and that's enough motivation, right, for you to be successful.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, totally. So being that you are a football player, so when did you really decide that you wanted to become a football player and that you wanted to be your profession and your job?
So I grew up in Strawberry Hill, right, in Surrey, and I was going to, high school at that point at Princess Margaret, and I was playing a lot of sports, doing a lot of different things. And it got to the point where I needed to make a serious decision that, what sport am I going to put all of my eggs into? Because it was kind of like, okay, look, like, I know I have a lot to give as in terms of an athlete. I just don't know where I want to put it. Yeah. At that point, I was playing hockey, I was playing basketball, and football was also on the forefront there too. So, football was obviously my first love. It was the thing that I loved doing the most. And I knew that I couldn't stay where I was at that moment in my life if I wanted to propel myself. So I actually ended up changing schools from Princess Margaret and going over into Delta to Sands, where they had a football program.
Right.
And when I got there, that's when the mind kind of turned on to the whole college aspect and getting the scholarships and all that kind of stuff, because that naturally that was the next step now.
Right. So would you say
I think it was about like 15, 16 years old where I realized, okay, I think I really want to see how far I can drive this thing.
So when you made that decision, decide to go to Sands, which does have a football program there, and you kind of were around people that were playing football as well, did that kind of motivate you to elevate your game even higher because you're playing now with guys who have been playing the game the whole life as well, just like yourself, and really put you in that right atmosphere?
Definitely, dude. There was a few friends that I was playing community football with who ended up transferring into Sands as well.
Right.
So there was already that that group of people that was coming into the school that had already been kind of together.
Right.
And we were all kind of realizing our potential, in and around that age, which was going into grade 11, going into grade 12 area. So going into grade 11, man, we were all starting to realize, okay, we like this a lot. We have athletic ability. Let's see how far we can go with it. And naturally, like in any locker room or any team sport, there's always going to be a little bit of competition, right? So the competition just kind of, was bred, I think, from that point onward.
And that's what helps make you a better athlete, I feel, when you have that healthy internal competition, right? Like you look at guys like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, right? They were the hardest workers in practice because they want to be the best in practice, right? And
I mean, I didn't that was the thing, right? Like we had this one kid on our team who was 6'7" in grade 11 and was already getting D1 looks. So naturally I would always want to challenge him because I was like, well, if he's getting those looks, I can get those looks.
You want to be the best, right? You want to go at the best to see where you stand, right? Exactly.
If you want to be noticed, you got to go against the guys who already noticed. You know what I mean? If you want to be the best,
to be the champ, you got to beat the champ, right? Exactly. Yeah. Speaking on football, so growing up, who were your role models in the game of football, and who did you kind of look up and kind of model your game at?
You know what? If we're talking about local people that I was looking up to, there was quite a few, right? Yeah. There was guys like Navraj Javasi. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
I've heard of him.
He first Indo-Canadian Sikh to wear a turban. He got a D1 scholarship, played at the University of Oregon, for the Ducks, which is such a huge program, right? Yeah. Pac-10 back in the day, Pac-12 now.
Yeah.
Then he went on to play pro, right? So that was one of my first guys that I was looking up to because, not only was he Punjabi, not only was he Sikh, not only was he Indo-Canadian, but he was somebody who was already, kind of trailblazing that path for guys like me, guys who were coming up who wanted all of that. You know what I mean? So he was one of those guys. There was a lot of guys in that crew. Guys like Rolly Lambala, a BC Lions player, guys like Ryan Lucas, who was playing football for a while. Will Loftus, David Sanchez. All these guys are local product guys that actually built a platform for themselves in the game of football.
Right.
And I was trying to surround myself around these types of people from a very young age. And as a matter of fact, I started to surround myself around those people from a very young age. And by doing so, I think I learned a type of work ethic that was naturally kind of just being instilled in me from them.
Right.
That I got to do all of this kind of stuff in order to get to where I want to get to.
Right, and that's kind of what was one of my next question was. So being a professional athlete, you got to have an extreme amount of work that I don't think very many people really understand. So speaking on those relationships and stuff like that, where did that work ethic really come from? Did it come from those relationships, or was that something that your family instilled in you, or something like that?
So I mean, it comes from various branches, right? Mm-hmm. So we'll look at my family first. Mm-hmm. My grandfather was one of my best friends, and he had always taught me, like, if you're going to do something, you're going to do it at 100%. Like, there's no lollygagging around. Like, let's just go put all of your effort into it and see what you come out with. And so that was one of the lessons that I had to learn from a younger age. The other thing was, being a heavier kid, like I was saying to you earlier, as kids are, sometimes we tend to be a little mean to one another, and, like being bullied from a young age, with the fat jokes and all that kind of stuff kind of had motivated me to be a better version of myself. So I was like pushing myself all the time in the gym and on the field anyways. Mm-hmm. And then that work ethic really kind of started to mature and show its face when I started surrounding myself around those types of guys that I had just mentioned in and around high school, where, I spoke to my parents about personal training, and I got football specific training, and I was doing that like 5 times a week with these guys and with other trainers who were like pretty well established in their own right. So it was all motivated though, because I didn't just want to be another anomaly. I just didn't want to be another number. Like, mm-hmm. I wanted to be something more, and I knew that I wasn't 6'6", because I'm only like 6'3",
right? Like
on a good day, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I wasn't like 10% body fat, so I knew that in order to accomplish those things, like I needed to do a lot more work, and I had to put a lot more effort into the next guy.
Right. But you know what? That's what makes, like, everybody loves that type of story in sports. The guy who's undersized, who works his ass off, and gets where he wants to go, right? And I bet for you, seeing guys like someone who's 6'7" in high school, right, that really pushed you even more to become the best version of you can be, right? And
yeah, absolutely. I mean, because like you look at I don't know how much you know about football, but like a lot of the times, like when guys are getting recruited, not a lot of the times, but some of the times when people get recruited, they get recruited for their size, because the coaches look at that and say, hey, you know what, this guy has the tangibles. There's a lot of things that we can teach him, but you can't teach size, you can't teach speed, and you can't teach power. And so for me, I had to teach myself speed, power, and all that kind of stuff, because I had to make up for it in the size department.
Exactly. And like you look at quarterbacks in the football, like Tom Brady, probably the greatest quarterback of all time, didn't run a good 40, didn't run test well at the combine, but you couldn't measure those intangibles he had, the smarts.
You can't measure heart, man.
Exactly. You can't measure that work ethic. You could have got like Russell Wilson. He's 5'11", I think, 5'10", but he's probably one of the best quarterbacks in the game, because
same thing, right?
Exactly, right. And now you look at the quarterbacks now, like guys like Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray are getting picked number 1 because a guy like Russell Wilson shows that you can be successful as long as you have that work ethic, right?
Exactly. You can't. There's a lot of things that you can't measure, man.
Exactly.
The combine's good for some stuff; it's not good for others, right? So.
Exactly. Yeah. So going back to your football career too, was there ever a point that you felt like, hey man, this is not for me? Like I think I made the wrong decision in my life. And if you did have that moment, what or who really pushed you off that ledge and kept you going?
You know what? To be honest with you, man, I don't think I ever had a moment where I was like, football isn't for me. Mm-hmm. I always knew football was for me. Like that was never a question. There was no hesitation there. Mm-hmm. But there were moments in my career where, before the professional stuff just kind of took off, where I did tend to look into life after football. Mm-hmm. Like, what am I going to do if, tomorrow I go on the field and I have like an ACL injury, or I blow up my Achilles, or I break my femur. You know what I mean? Like, what am I going to do? So I was trying to be smart with what was happening around myself, especially in university, like trying to project myself into the future to see what is it that I'm interested in doing after football. Mm-hmm. But I don't think I necessarily was ready to walk away from it even then.
Totally.
Whereas I know my family was kind of like, it's time to focus on school, do all that kind of stuff. And, naturally, like as any parent would want their kid to focus on school and, have a career that's a little bit more solid than, a career like professional sports.
Professional sports, yeah. But yeah, I mean, like you said, like I feel now with a lot of athletes it's a lot of athletes coming in, they have those business managers, those money managers, and they're also thinking about what is life after whatever my field is, right? Whereas
Yeah,
I think previously a lot of athletes, you see them, they're kind of like they retire, and you hear those horrible stories of guys being broke and they don't know what they're going to do, they get stuck. So I feel that's a really good message to have to younger athletes. Like, hey, if you want to do this, that's great, pursue it, but also understand that you have a finite amount of time in that professional league, and you have
That's right.
because you could retire in your late 20s, early 30s. That's not like 65 like the rest of us. That's like prime age for working for the rest of your life, right?
Right, and you know what? There was a thing that I used to hear about, a while ago, where people are like, "Well, if you're putting so much effort into Plan B, then Plan A is never going to come to fruition."
Right.
But I never looked at it that way. Like education isn't Plan B. Education is something that you need to propel yourself, anyways. So it was just so happened that it was paid for. So why not take advantage of it?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
If you get the opportunity to get a scholarship like that, you might as well make the best of that education, right? So speaking about education, so you spent your time at UBC. So what was your experience like at UBC? Being at home, playing for the Thunderbirds. What was that experience like?
You want to know how I got to UBC first? Like, do you want to know?
Explain to me the story about how you got to UBC first. We were just talking about that earlier.
So it's kind of funny, right? UBC had a vested interest in me since I was 16 years old.
Right.
So they really wanted me to come there. They had the coaches at the time were like, scholarships on the table as soon as you graduate. But I was, for the lack of a better word, I was just a jock in high school.
Right.
Didn't really care about the educational aspect, and more so just about sports. I wanted to, kind of push myself in that, not knowing that I needed the education back then as well. In the sense that, if you don't have the GPA to get in, then where are you going to go play? So there was a little time period there where I had to take time after high school to bump up my grades, and then I did accept my scholarship to the Thunderbirds for UBC. But what happened was there was like an anomaly in the enrollment process initially. So even though they had accepted my admission and my scholarship was on like the table and I had taken it, they messed up on their end because there was a credit that I was short that they overlooked.
Right.
So, and by doing so, I didn't want to sit out another year and play another year of junior football with, at that time they were the South Surrey Rams that transitioned into Langley.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to do that. Sorry?
They're a well-established program here.
Well-established junior program, right? So, I didn't want to go back to playing with the Rams. And so I thought, okay, well, what's my next step here? Well, the next step was that I had already taken multiple other visits across Canada and, some schools in the States as well.
Right.
Where I felt, okay, well, I got a couple of friends who I know that are committed to the University of Regina. Why not go there? And I did. And I quickly learned that I shouldn't have made that decision out of haste, that I probably should have just waited and gotten my shit together at home before transitioning into UBC. So after a season at the U of R, I thought, okay, this isn't for me. It's time to come back home. So, you can't just transfer back from college to play. You have to sit out a year. And so what I did was I sat that 1 year out, went to Kwantlen, upgraded a little bit more, played my last season with the Langley Rams at that point. And then I went to UBC, man. And I went there still as a defensive tackle, defensive end.
Yeah, I was reading that you were a defensive end back then before you were an O-lineman.
Yeah, I was a defensive end, defensive tackle, man, for pretty much my whole career up until I got into what was my last year of UBC, right? So when I got to UBC, they had talked and kind of flirted with the idea of transitioning me to offensive line, which I was receptive to. I had never played it since high school, so there was already a big gap, so I was a little bit nervous about that, but I was totally up to it.
Right.
So they kept me as a defensive tackle. And it was until my last year at UBC where they thought, okay, we want to transition you over to the offensive line. We think that's where you're going to have the best prospects of getting drafted and all that kind of stuff.
All right. So speaking on the position switch, right? So that's kind of like they're similar, but they're not exactly the same skills. You got to have a completely.
They're not the same. They're not
the same. So I've never played football. I'm just a big football fan like that. So excuse me for my ignorance, but.
It's all good.
The D-line is much more of a sexier position than O-line, right?
It's sexier because you get the attention, right? You go get the sack, you get the
stats, and stuff like that.
You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
It's cool, yeah.
How much of a learning curve was it? Just basically switch to the other side of the ball instead of attacking the quarterback, you're protecting the quarterback.
You know what? So the coaches always said that I was very athletically inclined as an offensive lineman because my footwork was phenomenal. I was a strong kid. Like I was always generally one or two strongest people on the team, and usually I was number one, and I liked that. And they wanted to use that skill set as an offensive lineman because I was also a very aggressive form of player too. Like I was a very nasty player. That's just
playing with an edge, right?
Yeah, like I can't play soft and all that kind of stuff and not say anything. Like I would talk a lot of smack. You know what I mean? Like I would play dirt. But that's just the way I played. Right. And they wanted that type of play on the offensive line. But man, it was a sobering moment going from D to O because, you haven't played, like I haven't played that position at that point in almost 8 years.
Right.
And, learning, just like the technique of getting into a stance and then, that was one thing, but learning an offensive playbook is night and day.
Yeah. Like I've seen, like you hear stories about guys like the playbooks are like that thick and it's just
unbelievable. They were thick, man. Like they were literally textbooks, right? So on top of the full course load that I'm taking up at UBC, I have another course that I have to get.
Much, yeah.
So, that's what I kind of looked at it as. But I was very, very lucky and fortunate that I had a center who was very, very smart, Lord Randall, and a tackle in Alec Pinnell who was very smart as well. Two very, very savvy players.
Right.
And then they kind of threw me in between them, right, as a left guard.
Right.
So if there was stuff that I didn't know, I was asking them, like talking and asking questions like nonstop. Like even now, like in my career, like even now, like ask questions nonstop because that's what kind of gets you to the know-how anyways.
Exactly. And I find that when you ask questions and you learn from your peers, it's a little bit more receptive. It's a bit easier to understand because they know how to explain it in a way that you would understand, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then I'm sure they probably thought I was like an annoying little 5-year-old at times, but no, I asked like this, like I thought that questions were like, legitimate, but were probably stupid questions, but nevertheless, I was asking them.
Yeah, totally.
And there was some times where I'd just be like, okay, man, just tell me where to go, who to hit. And they would just point me in the direction and I would just let loose. So it was a moment at UBC where there was a huge learning curve, but there wasn't much time.
Right.
So,
it was accelerated.
But I had to get up to speed.
Totally.
And I did very well at it.
Yeah,
surprisingly.
Clearly, because my next question was: so you get drafted by the Argos in the 3rd round of the draft. I believe it was 21st overall. What was that moment like? You always hear those stories. Well, when I get drafted, it's the greatest thing ever. What was that like for you and your family, knowing that you finally reached your goal of playing professional football?
So I'll back to the last season of UBC. I was playing an offensive lineman. So playing that position, what I had. I was training with now Bassi in the off season because he was a big, strong guy, right? So him and I trained very similar. He was just a freak of nature, and I wanted to be training like that. And he just kind of told me in the off season, he was like, "Look, dude, just go all out, like lay it all on the line because it might be the last time you get to do it."
Right.
So, and by doing so, at the end of the season, I was a conference all-star, but I was also a first-team All-Canadian, and I think that's what kind of got the attention for the combine and the draft and all that kind of stuff, which led to me being drafted and all that. So, being drafted in May of 2014 was, man, that was a crazy moment, dude. Like sitting at home, all my friends and family, like we had a bunch of food, like, everyone's watching TSN. We're looking at the ticker at the bottom.
Right.
They're talking about me in terms of getting drafted, in the first 3 rounds, but where I'm going, who I'm going to,
you had
no
idea.
Clue, right? No clue. So, I'm sitting there and then I get a 416 area code phone number giving me a call. And I was like, okay, like it might be a cousin.
Right.
But the chances are it's probably not. So anyways, I take the call and it was Coach Scott Milanovich at that point, the head coach of the Toronto Argonauts. And he said, yeah, Jas, we're about to pick you for, to come and join our squad in the summer.
For me, like you see it on TV and stuff. That must have been so proud, not only for you but all your family, and just knowing that all that hard work you put on into it, all the sacrifices you and your family, it finally came to fruition. That must have been just an unbelievable moment.
I mean, for everybody, right? More so, for me, it was obviously huge because knowing that all that hard work is paying off, but inside, I think even for my parents, that was such a big moment because they knew that all of the effort that they had put in me from steering me away from doing the negative stuff.
Right.
keeping me out of trouble and all that kind of stuff. And my two older sisters being there, and knowing that how much effort they had put into keeping me on the straight and straight. So I think for everybody, it was like a huge moment. It was a huge moment.
Right.
Yeah.
And I get, even all those obstacles you had to overcome, whether it was, going back and upgrading your education or making a mistake and going to Regina first and then having to come back to UBC, right?
Yeah, and like injuries along the way and things that you just can't control that happen along the way. You know what I mean? Like, there was a lot of stuff, man. A lot of stuff that we're not talking about, but a lot of stuff.
I feel you. I feel there's a lot of stuff that goes into becoming where you are now. Trust me. Like with any, right? So it's
never a straight path, right?
You never have a straight path in life. It's not
see those Instagram videos with a pen going side to side before you get to like the actual destination.
Exactly, right? Nothing in life is ever straightforward. There's always an obstacle you got to jump over, or a turn you got to take, and another turn to get back on the right path. Right?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of things that go into it. For
exactly.
Sure. Yeah.
So you spend time with the Argos. What was your experience like with the Argos like?
Very humbling, man. You're coming into a league that's, the best of the best from not only Canada, but the United States, right? Yeah. You got a lot of ex-NFL players up in there and all that kind of stuff, and guys who spent time with, like legitimate squads and, with various teams, like any 32 teams in the NFL. I'm sure I came across a player who played with one of them. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So like it's a different league, man. It's a different speed. So getting used to that was a little challenging. The first year was a crash course, like really just understanding where you are and like, can you do this?
Right.
So, and then obviously that book is like, even more intricate than the one that I had at UBC.
Right.
And the other crazy part was as soon as I got to Toronto, they were just like, okay, well, you're not a guard. You have a guard. You're a center. So I was like,
another position, and center is an extremely hard position in football because you got to call
extremely, cerebral position, extremely difficult position because there's so much more that goes on with it. You got to make the protection on the line. When you come up to the line, you dissect the defense right away, and then you make the blocking scheme, and then you got to snap the ball, and you got to make sure everything is perfect. You know what I mean? So it was that was the biggest hill that I had to climb as a professional athlete was to get used to, the smarts of what it was to be a center or an offensive lineman at that league in that time. So a lot of long nights with my head buried in a book, and oftentimes hitting it against the wall because I just didn't get it. But eventually, it kind of sunk in.
That's with anything in life. I feel as if you just keep at it, keep pecking at it, you will understand it eventually, right?
Eventually, I mean, you're bound to get what you're going after for sure.
Now, did you play with the Argos when I believe Ricky Ray was the quarterback?
Ricky Ray was the quarterback. Yeah,
so he's a CFL legend. What was it like playing with him?
My first introduction to Ricky Ray was I think so. Rookie minicamp had just finished.
Yeah.
And, now training camp was about to commence, right? So I wake up one morning and I'm hitting it. I walk into the elevator and Ricky Ray's standing there. And I was like, oh, hey, Rick, like I'm Jas, whatever. Introduce myself.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey, how old are you? And then I tell him my age and he kind of gave his head a shake like, holy crap, you're such a young kid.
Right.
And I'm like, Rick, I've been watching you since I was 12, right? So and then he was like, yeah, don't say that out loud. And then it was kind of a funny moment, but no, it was cool, man. He's a cool guy, very nice guy, humble dude.
So in your time in Toronto, who was like some of like your go-to guys, like your go-to favorite teammates that you can remember?
Dude, honestly, I spent a lot of time with the offensive line, and
most position groups stick together, right?
Together, and it's not that we don't get along with the defensive linemen or anything like that. It's not that. It was just that those are the guys that you're working with for the majority of the day. So naturally, those are the guys that you're kind of gonna hang around. Yeah. So for me, it was the guys that were so far ahead were like Chris Van Zyl, who even now is still playing and he's still killing it, like just an absolute legend in Toronto, and now he's with Hamilton, and he's a ex-McMaster product. And the other guy that I leaned on a lot was Wayne Smith, man. Wayne Smith was another legend in the CFL, played for years, played at Appalachian State, and kind of welcomed me with a tough love approach, and it worked.
Right.
Tyler Holmes, very, very, receptive individual. Same with Jarrell King. Jarrell and I would hang out sometimes on, days off and be able to, and he would be able to just kind of calm me down because he knew that I was, a little bit overwhelmed at certain points because I really wanted to, excel and be good. And I was just getting kind of frustrated with the process at the moment. So.
And I'm sure those guys that were veterans that had a bit of experience, they kind of took you under their wing, kind of showed you how to be professional, right? How to understand the professional game, how it's different from college.
Yeah, absolutely. Like those guys definitely were just kind of like, you're going to get it. Just you have what it takes. Just, keep grinding and you'll get it one day.
Right. So
they were great group of guys for sure.
Totally. So your time in Toronto, you just finished, that chapter ends, and you joined the Lions, your hometown team. What was it like playing for your hometown football team at BC Place Stadium with all those fans and everything? What was that experience like?
Unbelievable, dude. I can't even tell you. Man, when I joined the Lions, they signed me as a practice roster example during the expansion period, which was usually happens in October when all the cuts from the NFL are kind of being made and all that kind of stuff. So. They had a spot for me and they really wanted me. And from my understanding after the fact is I think they really wanted to draft me.
Right.
But they just never had the ability to do so because Toronto had the spot. And, the way the draft lined up that year, whatever happened, I don't know. Right. But from my understanding, they really wanted me to be there. And I really wanted to be back home and play for the hometown team. And I remember walking into the locker room and already knowing so many of the guys because I had, like I said, I had spent time with Willie Lumball already. Right. Guys like Cody Husband and I were friends from before.
Right.
And, guys like Kirby Fabian, I knew because we played against each other. He was at the University of Calgary. I was at, UBC.
UBC, right.
So, there was a good sense of familiarity and it just felt like home. You know what I mean? You felt like you were in the right spot.
You felt like you were you kind of it all came back to circle.
Full circle, man. It came back together. And honestly, man, from the very first day that I walked into that building, it just felt like that was where I was supposed to be the whole time.
Right.
So it was awesome, dude. My time there was phenomenal. I had a great time. I had great coaches, and again, I had the ability to grow and develop as a player, and it showed after.
Right. So speaking of coaches, so you played under, of course, probably the greatest coach in CFL history, Wally Buono. What was he like as a coach? And does any lasting things that even lessons he might have taught you, but as a team in general, kind of stick out with you forever?
Wally's a legendary coach, and I have nothing but the most highest respect for him. Mm-hmm. He's he knows how to take charge of a locker room, and I'm telling you, man, when my first year there, we had Jeff Tedford, who was the head coach, and I don't know if you remember Tedford, but he was coach.
He was a coach at Cal.
Coach at Cal, coached Aaron Rodgers, that kind of stuff. So, he came up for tried his whole hand in the CFL thing, and then quickly was let go, unfortunately for him. And then Wally stepped back at the helm, and I'm telling you, man, as soon as the news came back that Wally was going to be the coach again, players were literally saying, "Man, we'll run through a brick wall for the guy."
Yeah,
that's the type of impact he had on a locker room, and he had an impact on me, man. And him and I had a really good relationship, even till this day. If I see him. It's always super respectful and I show him nothing but love and same with him and he's just such a good guy, man.
Yeah.
And very supportive of me, very supportive of my development. He knew that even though I had got drafted at a little bit of an older age at 25, he knew that I had a lot of miles left in the tank.
Right.
And he knew that I was developing, and he acknowledged that. He's like, I see you developing. I see you're doing good. He's like, I know you can play in this league.
Right.
It's all up to you if you want to. And the one thing that I respect about Wally the most is that he never bullshit you. There was no bullshit. There was no bullshit with Wally Buono, man. If he told you how he felt, that's exactly what it was. There was no having to dissect something and figure it out. No, Wally told you what it was. And then you would either take it or not. And if you didn't, then oftentimes you wouldn't be there. You know what I mean?
And so I know, just reading about him and kind of listening to stories about him, he was kind of that old school tough love guy, right? Where basically he tell you straight up, you're straight up, and if not, he was not afraid to cut people or anything like that because he had the team mind him first, right?
But he was. That's just the type of man that Wally was, right? He was not afraid to, show who he was, and I think by doing so, that's why guys respected him so much. Guys who were on that squad way longer than I am had a probably had a much better relationship with Wally than I did. But I'm telling you, man, like for the years that I was there, that Wally was there, like it was a good relationship. He was a good coach. I wanted to be there for him,
Right.
and I wanted to play for that guy.
You wanted to run
him,
for him.
And I got to give a shout out, honestly, to Dan Durazio as well. Who's a legendary offensive line coach, and I didn't feel like I was developing in Toronto as an offensive lineman, but I'm telling you, as soon as I got to the Lions under Wally and under Dan Durazio, my game started taking a different form for sure.
That's I think in football, it's more X's and O's are important, but also with football because you have such a big roster, right? Managing and understanding to take control of a locker room is probably the biggest thing. Being that leadership figure, like you look at a guy like Bill Belichick or Wally Buono or Pete Carroll, they'll be able to build that culture in that program. I think that's the biggest thing with coaching in football. If you can build the right structure, right program, you'll see it flourish. And Wally Buono did that for 20 years plus with the Lions, right?
And he did it with some great players, man. Some legendary players. You know what I mean? So guys are in the Hall of Fame. So he was doing something right. He had the right formula. It's a shame that he retired, but I mean I get it. All good things come to an end.
Everything has to come to an end, yeah.
But man, like I was very, very blessed to be there with him for sure.
Totally. So going back to yourself, so we touched a little bit on injuries and stuff like that. So I know injuries are a big part of the game, and also they're very tough mentally to deal with, right? So
they can be.
Yeah, exactly. Because for example, if you're playing something and you've experienced it in your whole life and it's taken away from you, it's of course going to affect you. So how did you deal with the different types of injuries that you dealt with throughout your career, whether that's if you had a younger age to the professional league?
We'll go back to high school. When I left PM and I went to Sands to play football, I was doing very well, and for all intents and purposes, I was getting some attention from some schools.
Right.
The guys that I was looking up to as well. So, but things kind of took a quick turn for the worse when I got diagnosed with meningitis, like within my first 2 weeks of being in school.
Right.
And to the point where I didn't know I had meningitis, to the point where it accelerated and it got really, really bad, to the point where, they didn't know what was going to happen with me. You know what I mean? So having to come back from that was really tough because, as a kid, you don't know any better. The only thing you want to do is get back on the field, and you don't know the process, and you don't respect the process of what it should be to get back on the field. So, I think that year I really struggled because I should have given myself more time, but I didn't. And then I tried getting back on the field, and it was very detrimental to my health. But grade 12 was a little bit different. So that was the first big one. And then I remember playing up at UBC. I had a concussion that kind of sidelined me for a few weeks, which kind of sucked too, because I was doing really well and I was having a lot of fun doing what I was doing, and then all of a sudden this freak accident happens in practice where I get hit in the side of the face that on like a very simple drill, and both of us end up getting a concussion. And I was out. So I was not like knocked out, but super spaced out to the point where things definitely didn't look and feel right.
And it's hard mentally with a concussion as well, because you hear like, okay, I got a sprained ankle, broken leg, whatever. There's a time frame of when you can go back to start. With a concussion, it's so arbitrary because it's all based on your brain and when you how you feel, right? Like one day you could feel great, the next day you could feel really bad.
And that was the thing, right? Like I had no idea what that was going on. Up until that point, I had a couple of minor concussions, in the sense that I had to sit out for a couple of days and I was okay, and I would go through the concussion protocol thing, and then I would be okay, and then they would clear me, and then I would be back at it like no problem. Right. This one was different, man. Like when I had that first concussion, that big concussion, man, like I'm telling you, like there was no controlling your emotions. Like I was emotional all of a sudden for no reason. Like my balance was gone. Like I couldn't even stand on a leg. If I was trying to for the life of me, like I had no balance. I was
equilibrium was all messed up, yeah.
But it was all over the map. So the UBC did a hell of a job. They, at that point they had the concussion stuff was already in the forefront now of football, and like all the stuff about integrating yourself back into sport was super proven and scientifically conducted. So they did an amazing job with the concussion protocol and, easing me back into the workload and getting me back on the field as fast as they did. I mean, after a few weeks, which is of sitting on the sideline, you think, is this ever going to end? Because like you said, right, it's such an arbitrary injury. Like, you have no control over how it goes down.
Totally.
So I was lucky that it was only a few weeks. For others, it can turn into months. So.
And I guess just, being that, football was part of your daily life, right? Not being able to partake in football in your day-to-day activities, that must have been huge mentally as well, because like you love the game so much and it's been taken from you, right?
Well, I mean, yeah. And the other thing is, like, when I was at UBC, I was a captain. I was the captain of the team. Exactly. And so, I had an unwritten rule or an unwritten code where, I had to lead by example.
Exactly. You're the leader of the team.
Right? I didn't take practices off. You know what I mean? Like, that wasn't my thing. Like, I wouldn't, complain about a headache and have a day to chill out. Right. That was just not who I was. I grinded.
Exactly.
And so for me to sit there and having to sit there and not being allowed to do anything was kind of tough. And, me being the guy that I was, I would try to sneak into some drills and then get, cussed out by the coaches and tell me to go back to the sideline.
Right.
But, I was trying to be back out there.
Right. Because it's tough, right? Like, as, being a leader of a team, being a leader of, men, you want to lead by example and show that, hey, if I can tough it out, you guys certainly can too, right? But then again, you have to watch out for yourself as well, because...
And again, right, respecting the process. You have to respect the process of what's happening, right?
Totally.
So as much as I understood the process, I just didn't respect it and didn't care for it, because I was like, I want to be back.
But that comes with experience, right? Once you experience something like that, you understand, okay, this is what I got to do if this roadblock comes in the way, and this is how I got to attack it.
Yeah. There was some long conversations with some coaches who were like, look, we need you. Stop doing the dumb stuff. Like, just literally come here and, like, if you want to be on the field, like, be on the field and just help us. Like, we don't want you to partake. And, like, it came down to a point where I had to have that conversation with the head coach.
Right. And
he was just like, look, Jas, like, I need you and I need you to lead. But at this point, I just need you to lead from the sideline type of thing. So it was tough, but, you got to do what you got to do. And like I said, thankfully it was only a few weeks, whereas it's been a few months for a lot of people.
Right.
So, yeah.
So definitely the talk on injuries was, it's definitely, as you said, the process with injuries and the process in football and everything, right? Switching to the community, being a Indo-Canadian Punjabi football player, how much pride you take in being that, hey, kids can now see not only people before you, but your journey, and how there's now a pathway for young Punjabi or young guys in general that want to play football. How much?
So I always pay respect first to the people who did it before me. I'm not the first Indo-Canadian to play in the CFL. Right. There was guys like David Sidhu who played back in the 70s. I can't even 70s or 80s. I'm probably aging him now, but UBC guy.
UBC guy, yeah.
There was another BC boy by the name of Bobby Sink. We all know what he did. He went to an XFL ring, Super Bowl ring, then he got a Grey Cup ring. You know what I mean? After him came Navaraj Bassi. And then after Navaraj Bassi was my turn. So, and I apologize on this podcast if I'm missing somebody. I'm not trying to throw shade to nobody. But those are the people that I knew of, right? That came before me. And so then when it was my turn to step up into that type of limelight, I was there with Cody Husband. Cody Husband actually is, he's half Punjabi. He's a half Punjabi player, and he was doing it for a couple of years before me, another UBC product, right? So, I think when the two of us were in the league, we started getting that recognition of being the Indo-Canadian influence in the CFL. And, there was articles that came out, and we got our attention for it. Then came Suk Chung a couple of years after I did.
He's the Lions right now, right?
He's with the Lions now. He's a Port Coquitlam boy, was playing with the University of Calgary. He went to Bombers, now he's with the Lions, first round pick, hell of a player.
Exactly.
So, now, and I'm sure, we were all, the three of us were actually playing at one point in the league together.
Yeah.
So, which is actually pretty awesome to think that, you got BC players who were, three of them who were all in the league at the same time at one point.
Definitely.
On different teams. So, yeah, man, very, very, I take a lot of pride in that. I think one of the things is, though, football isn't as big as in every Punjabi household as hockey or basketball is, or soccer is.
Right.
For all intents and purposes, football takes the fourth seat in the car.
Yeah.
In the back window one. So, it was tough because a lot of people didn't know what football was, but even then they showed a lot of love, knowing that we were professional athletes, that we had accomplished something. You know what I mean? So being able to go out during the Nugget Keaton and, to, not only show people who we were, but even, show love to the community by giving out like tickets and all that kind of stuff was huge. It was huge because they brought a lot of attention.
It brings that personal connection because they see people, hey, there's somebody that looks like me doing something that I see on TV, right? It personalized. Like for me, like seeing guys like in playing hockey, like Jajar Kara, those type of guys. Seeing guys that look like me, that come from a similar background, that kind of really personalizes it for me, and that's
absolutely it should be, and that was the one thing that I always told anybody that I talked to was, look, man, it wasn't God given for me. Like it wasn't like I had this exceptional amount of talent
you weren't born a freak of nature athlete, right?
No, I wasn't a freak of nature, dude. Yeah. I had to work.
Exactly.
So when I see these kids, I'm like, dude, like I see myself in you because I know you could do what I did.
Right.
Like it's just hard work, man, and it's mindset. But it has to come from the home. It has to come from a young age, and you have to have a support system, dude.
Exactly. Like the biggest thing for me, like even starting this podcast for me, right? It started off with a love of sport. That was the main thing. I've loved sport, whether it's football, hockey, soccer, basketball, whatever, right? Yeah. And I never really wanted to put myself out there like that because I always felt kind of like I don't want to do it. It's kind of embarrassing. But it was actually my parents when I asked them, like, hey, is this something that I should do? And they told me, hey, you've been reading the sports section since you were like 6 years old, right?
It's always something that you're interested in.
Exactly, right? And I think when it comes, like exactly what you said, you got to work at it, right? So like for me, I know I'm not perfect at it yet, but I'm working at it, right? I think that's the one thing that people forget in sport or anything in life is people always think with the end goal, but they don't think about the process, the work that it takes to get there. But as listening to your story and stuff like that.
And read the title of your sweatshirt, man. It's process. Yeah. It's process of sports, dude. Exactly. It's always a process, dude. You're never gonna be at the top of the mountain just because you want to be there. Yeah. You're gonna have to climb that motherfucker, right? Pardon my French, but like,
exactly.
You gotta hike, man. You gotta take a step.
Right.
So it is a process, man. You gotta respect it for sure.
And putting your whole like football journey, like piecing it together, would you not say just going through those obstacles and working? That's probably like the most like how the best you feel, how the most.
The thing that I'm proud of most is the stuff that I had to go through.
Right.
Things that I had to overcome. The injuries that I had to overcome. The concussion was one thing that I had to overcome. One of many injuries that I had. You know what I mean? Like I can go on and on with the knee injuries that I had, and like I blew up my bicep in my last year with the Lions.
Right.
Complete reconstructive surgery. Like you know what I mean? Like you have to go through these things, man. Like and then by doing so, you become a little bit more appreciative of what's happening and where you are.
Exactly. Yeah. And it builds character, and it teaches you how to work and how to maintain that work ethic that got you there, right?
Exactly.
Right. So, I really do appreciate you telling me about your football journey and everything. I do have a couple questions because I know you're still a big football guy about the NFL, right?
Yes.
What do you do? Who's your team in the NFL if you have a team?
So like I told you, man, like I only started playing offense my last year at UBC.
Right.
And then obviously my pro career, right?
Right.
But before that, I was very much focused on the defensive side of the game.
Being a D lineman,
right? And I was defensive tackle and defensive end, and there was guys that I looked up to in terms of role models in the NFL, like Julius Peppers. Like, man, I had two different Julius Peppers jerseys growing up. Like the guy was my idol. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Reggie White, guy was a freak. You know what I mean? But the team that I watched was the Baltimore Ravens. And I've been watching them for a long, long time, and I always loved watching the battles with them and the Steelers.
Oh yeah, those battles with the Steelers are unbelievable.
And these two ridiculously gifted defenses going at it with one another.
It was all those Hall of Famers, man. All those Hall of Famers. You had Suggs, Lewis, Ed Reed. You had Troy Polamalu.
Troy. You had big Casey Hackett in the middle. Exactly. Brett Kiesel. Ike Taylor.
All
these guys, and Joey Porter.
Yeah, Joey Porter. Yeah.
Every foot.
Yeah.
Yeah, like these guys, like their defense was really good, and then their defense would square off with the Baltimore defense, who was respectively very good. So
exactly,
I love watching those battles, man.
So being a Ravens fan, you are. Then I'm assuming you're a big Lamar Jackson fan, then too.
Yeah, I'm a Ravens fan, right? So I'm a Lamar Jackson fan for sure because he's what's kind of trying to take our team to the promised land, right? So I'm a big Ravens fan. I'm a big Lamar fan. I'm a big time Ray Lewis fan.
Who are some other guys in the game right now that you just love to watch?
Man, that's a good question, dude. I've been watching a lot of offensive linemen, man.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's what I was playing.
Yeah, that's
right?
what you are. So yeah.
So I mean, naturally, like I look at some of the best offensive linemen in the league. You guys look at that Tyron Smith from the Dallas Cowboys.
Dallas got an unbelievable O-line.
The guy's a freaking Terminator.
He is.
He's built like
he pancakes guys. He pancakes guys all the time.
Built like out of marble. Yeah. You know what I mean? Trent Williams, phenomenal.
That's a big pickup for the 49ers too. This year with Trent Williams.
Kelsey from the Philly, Jason Kelsey. Was it Justin Kelsey? Jason Kelsey. Kelsey from Philly, the center. Unbelievable athlete, man. Unbelievable athletes on the offensive line nowadays, dude. Guys who are like astonishingly like crazy athletically gifted, right? Like these are the types of guys that are playing offensive line. You see the draft that just happened in the 40s. Some of these guys were running crazy, like Tristan, that Tristan Wirfs kid from Iowa.
Yeah,
that guy's gonna be a problem, man.
Right? Yeah,
bulldozer, right? Like, man, there's so many offensive linemen that I'll have to watch now that are still playing that are just freaks, right?
Yeah, and like speaking of O-line, right? Like I said before, it's not a sexy position at all. It doesn't get barely any notoriety.
You know who made a sexy for me was Larry Allen.
He was playing for the Cowboys back in the 90s. Yeah.
Cowboys and the Niners, man. I'm telling you, Larry Allen was a monster, man. I don't know if you've ever seen any of his highlights, but
I've seen it on YouTube before. I've seen them before on YouTube.
Problem. That was a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
So like being that O-line isn't like the sexiest position or like the most notoriety, but for me, like I've really over the last couple of years really started to understand football, not to the point where you guys would, but kind of understand it's more of a chess matchup. And hey, without a good offensive line, man, your offense can stall so much, right? You look
if you don't have those five guys up front,
exactly,
you don't got anything. You don't got a chance.
Nothing.
Brady doesn't have a chance. Brady's not going to have a chance if he doesn't have adequate offensive line. Exactly. You know what I mean? And for a lot of the times, when Tom Brady was killing it, he had a really good offensive line. He had some Hall of Fame guys in front of him, like Logan Mankins, And then you look at Baltimore, like they had Marshall Yanda when they were winning the Super Bowl with Flacco, and like you have to have these pieces. You know what I mean?
The O-line's the foundation, right? They basically pave the way for protecting your quarterback for the open passing game, create those holes for the running back to attack. You look at Ezekiel Elliott, right? The
Cowboys' offensive line is freaky. Like they're all good. There's like 3 All-Stars on that offensive line.
There are 3 All-Pros. I think you had Frederick, who I think just retired.
Tyrone Smith, and then their guard, I forget his name. It's not coming to me right now. Their guard is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's called off the top, but they have like 3 or 4 Pro Bowlers on their O-line anyway, right?
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank, but man, they got a good offensive line, dude.
It's really good that jumpstarts the whole offense because they're stopping guys like whoever like the best pass rusher, whether that's Buckner or Chandler Jones, whoever, right?
They're stalling those guys and they're creating holes and they're opening up, giving Dak his time to throw that ball.
Exactly. So speaking on Brady, how did you feel about Brady leaving New England and going to Tampa?
Man, all good things come to an end.
Yeah.
Right? I think Brady's time in Tampa was probably something that has come to a conclusion. That doesn't necessarily mean that Brady's stopped doing what Brady's going to do. Mm-hmm. If you look at the core who's sitting with Brady in Tampa Bay right now, they got a kind of a scary deal going on, man.
A lot of good weapons on that team.
A lot of good weapons on that team, dude. On both sides of the ball, right?
Yeah, they got Shaquille Barrett.
Their offensive line's not bad, right? They're not a bad offensive lineman. I don't know what the running game's looking like right now. I don't know if they've added anybody in the offseason.
I don't know if they added anybody yet, but
we've got some pretty good receivers. You know what I mean? We got some really good receivers.
Gronk's back too.
Sorry?
Gronk's back too.
Gronk's back, and there you go. They got a couple of good tight ends now. Yeah. That offense is going to be spread, dude. It's going to be a spread offense. He's going to be dishing the ball out everywhere.
But if they play the Ravens, they're not going to beat the Ravens, right?
I don't think they will. No one's a beat the Ravens. They're going to get defeated.
Yeah, I mean, I got the Chiefs and the Ravens in the AFC Championship game for the next 10 years probably.
You know what? I see the Ravens doing some good stuff. I see the Chiefs doing some really, really good stuff. The team that surprised me the most in last year's playoff was Tennessee.
Yeah, because look at it.
Good put together.
But look, they had Taylor Lewan, Jack Conklin. They had a really good O-line, right? They
had these guys up front that were like moving dudes. But like even if they didn't, they had the juggernaut at running back.
They have some that monster Derrick
Henry. They had Derrick Henry. This guy literally came out of the X-Men characters, right?
He's a monster. He's a freak of nature the way he's built.
I don't know how anybody is like. He's like 7 feet 2 inches tall, 900 pounds, and runs like a 4.40. Like,
he's unbelievable.
How do you create that player, right? Exactly. That's a Madden cheat code right there. Right?
Totally.
So, yeah, they're a good team, man. It's gonna be interesting to see who comes out on top this year.
Totally. I can't wait for it. I mean, I'm dying for something sports to come back on.
Man, you know what? I hope it comes back in some capacity. I don't care if the stadiums are empty. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, and I had this conversation with somebody else, not long ago. Like, they were asking me, what do you think it's going to look like? And I said, well, if I were a betting man, it's probably going to be, empty stadiums and probably limited amount of people on the sideline. Probably not in terms of the team, but like in terms of the personnel that are on the sideline, probably limited. And they're probably going to have like some sort of crazy testing protocol in place where everybody gets tested before and after a game, right? So,
and especially in football, because football is different because you have such a big roster. Not only do you have the guys who are on offense and defense, but you have all the coaches, coordinators, athletic guys. You got ball boys. Everybody's on.
You have all the doctors on the sideline, right? Like you have PTs on the sideline. You have everybody.
And it's going to be different to see how they're going to incorporate all those different avenues and aspects of the game, the day-to-day game operations like that, right?
It's going to be interesting to see how they do it. Very interesting. I'm curious. But as long as it comes back, I'm happy. But like, it's going to be curious to see how they do it. Though.
Yeah. So I mean, hopefully everybody continues doing what they're doing, following our provincial and government health orders and stuff like that, and does their part. And hopefully everything kind of gets back to normal.
Yeah, eventually. And I think like even sports, like hockey and basketball, and I think baseball, they're talking about having it come back now too. So if I'm not mistaken, so.
I think baseball is they've kind of been hit or miss, but it looks like basketball and hockey definitely have plans in place to start up again. But
I mean, you have the Bundesliga is already playing now.
I know. I'd never watched the Bundesliga ever, but I've been the biggest Bundesliga fan.
Yeah. Dude, it's the only thing that's on,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
And I don't like watching soccer. You know what I mean? Like, but it's the only thing that's on, and it's entertainment. So
totally. Yeah. But yeah. So just to wrap us up, Jas, I really do appreciate you coming on. Best of the health to you, your family during this time, and I really do want to thank you again for coming on.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me, man. This was awesome. Hey, all the best to you, man. And dude, I wish nothing but the best for you, dude.
I appreciate it.